Hi! Today we're going to learn how to draw and shade clothing, particularly folds of clothing. For the first demonstration, I'm going to be drawing a shirt that has sort of a collar on it, and then after that I'll show you how to draw just a simple t-shirt. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're just going to do a simple line drawing of where you see the edges of the fabric, any edges of the folds. So I see the collar kind of coming down here like this. Here's kind of the edge of part of the zipper. Here's the other side of the collar. I'm really looking for where it goes behind the neck. That's going to help make it look 3D. It comes down around here. So I'm really drawing in the shape of the collar first. With me, I actually have a t-shirt on underneath, so I'm going to draw in the shape of the collar of the t-shirt. There's a little fold in the t-shirt right here. So I'm now that I have in the basic shapes of the collar, I'm starting to draw in just the lines showing where I see folds of fabric happening. I'm not doing the shading part yet, but I'm just drawing in loose lines showing where those folds are taking place. So there I have kind of the basic lines showing the folds of my fabric. I'm going to erase any parts of the shoulders now that the clothing comes in front of. And now that I have my basic line drawing, I can go in and start shading. So with the shading, I'm looking first of all for where are my darkest shadows. I see a shadow happening kind of right in these little areas behind the neck. That's really showing that the clothing's coming around the neck, and I also see that this back part here has a little bit more shading. That's going to help make it look 3D. And then with the folds of the clothing, usually in the center of the fold, it's going to be darker, and then as it fades to the edge, it's going to get a little bit lighter. That's showing the concave part of the fold, the part that curves inward. So again, it's kind of darker in the center and then fades to lighter on the edges. And as you go along with your shading, you may even notice some little folds that are a little more subtle that you didn't notice before. Often if you have a dark fold, there will be another sort of concave shadow part next to it. And what happens is as you start putting in those shadows, then you start seeing that the parts in between the shadows look like they're kind of popping out at you. Those are the folds of the fabric that are sticking out further. To make them look realistic, it's really important as your shading fades to the edges to have your gradation be nice and smooth and subtle. If you don't make the gradation subtle enough, the folds won't look 3D. They'll just look like weird streaks on your clothing. So you really got to work on making that gradation nice and subtle, and that's going to start defining those fabric folds so that they really look realistic. You can also look for any textures that you may have on your clothing, like little texture in the collar of the shirt. Also look for any other shadows that your clothing is casting on your skin. I notice there's a little bit of a shadow that my clothes cast onto the neck. Yours may or may not have that, but look for it, because any shadows that you see are going to make it look more realistic, like there's a little space between your clothing and your skin where it's resting on the skin. I'm continuing shading in these fabric folds as I go. I'm noticing there's some folds on the collar itself that I didn't really see before, so I'm shading those in. These ones are a little bit more subtle. Getting in any seams really helps. I notice on my collar there's a little seam that goes along the edge. So there you have just the beginning of how I would shade in this kind of jacket. Next we'll move on to just a basic t-shirt, and this is the same idea, but it's just a lot more simple. So if you're ready to go ahead and start your shading now, you can. If not, you can keep watching. For drawing just a simple t-shirt, again, I'm just starting with this curved neckline, and this part that goes behind the shoulder right here is a really important little detail for making your shirt look 3D. Now, even though the shirt is not sticking up the way a collared shirt would be, you still want to look for if there are any little curves or folds along the top edge, especially if their shirt isn't totally skin tight. There will probably be a few little fabric folds along the shoulder. I'm erasing any extra lines where it went in front of my shoulders. And then again, I'm just starting to draw in where I see folds. These lines are just really nice and light. So even if your person is just wearing a simple t-shirt, you probably still have lots of fabric folds that you can notice, and that's really going to help your shirt look realistic. And then I'm noticing, where are these fabric folds darker, getting in those darkest spots first. And then where do they fade to lighter? This one kind of fades out like this. Again, so they're fading lighter on the edges, and that's starting to define the shadows or the parts in between that kind of stick out. Even though you might be shading large areas, make sure that you keep your shading really nice and clean, because just because this is clothing doesn't mean it's any less important to your drawing looking good than the rest of your face is. So don't do a quick messy job on the clothing after you've spent such a long time doing a beautiful job on the face and hair. Doing a nice job on the clothing is really going to help your whole piece look professional and look complete. There may be a little bit of a shadow just right along the edge of the shoulder to kind of show that that shoulder is round. Maybe just a subtle shadow. You can look and see if you see one on your person, depending on how the light is hitting them. And again, there may be a little bit of a shadow towards the back of the collar where it curves behind the neck, and maybe your collar is casting just a little bit of a shadow on the neck itself. Maybe there's a little bit of texture on your collar. Maybe not. So there you have the basic idea for how you would shade a t-shirt.